or Fleischman, Tikkun Elevator, Kolel. Shir here tonight is on the Kriat Shemah. Drush Gimel. We got the Drush Gimel already. Oh, we came over here to Drush Shlishi. This is the third Drush we said. Binyan Dal Yehudi HaKridish Baruch HaDiskaret. Every time you say the Kriat Shemah, you're making a Yichud, which causes Abba Ve'ima to make a Yichud. As a result of that, it brings Shef into Zeranpin. He says, Aniskarem B'yoser Seit. So we're going to get into it in more detail, he says. And now we're going to come over here on number Gimel on page Samach Aleph in the Teva Gavanos. And we're going to start reading for number Gimel. Let me make sure I got this lined up. Okay, it's decently lined up. Okay, he says like this. Let me bring some more light on it. He says, Daki arba mine zivugim heim shal zervanuk. And he says, Rab Bevar Lamat Srichim Kama Mini Zivugim Shazer Anpin Vanuk. So why do you have to have 4 different kinds of zivugim? So I'm looking for vocabulary and just a kind of understanding how the light flows into Zer Anpin and the Nuk. The Kevin Zivugim Shal Zer Anpin Vanuk, and because of the yichud that takes place between them, which is the main thing that we're doing when we're praying and learning, that we're actually perfecting the worlds in the form of bringing opposites, male and female, for example, into oneness. So he said, so according to the nature of that yichud, that's the nature of the neshama, that's the panemius that comes to us. There's all different kinds of possibilities. There's different classes. So therefore, the yichud is going to take place because there's all different kinds of neshamas that come in. That's still a little bit of a mystery. It's safe enough to say that we have many different kinds of zivugim, but on the of entrance of different aspects into Zeranpin, but still mysterious. So now this is what the Rav says. He says this in the Eitz Chaim. This is the real secret, the truthful secret of the Kriat Shemah. So we understand that when you say Kriat Shemah, there's a yichud that takes place between Zohar and Nuk. This causes a yichud in Abba Ve'ima. Why? So the children of father and the mother, that is Abba Ve'ima or Chochma Bina, the children of them, are Zun. So he says that in order to bring Mochin Chadashim, so that also Zer Anpin and his Nukva should be able to make a yichud. Now I see from this that I said this wrong, so I'm going to say it right then, according to what he says. He says the yichud between Zohar and Nuk takes place after the yichud takes place in Abba Ve'ima. So Abba Ve'ima produce Shefa as a result of their yichud, just like it would be in a human being. This is that we produce the necessary elements that are required to produce a child. So this yichud that takes place between the parents produces zochar in neshamot, chadashot for zochar v'nok, b'neihem, their children. And the reason why is because this is when the yichud takes place of zochar v'nok, and as a result of that, that comes towards us. The holy banim acherim, and as a result of that, they bring forth new children. So therefore, you have to have this kavan in the Kriat Shemah to complete all of the zivugim ad ein sof. In other words, there's an infinite number of possible zivugim. Because the way that goes is that Zer Anpin receives shefa as a result of that yichud between Abba Ve'ima. He receives that. But they actually receive their shefa from Eric Anpin. The Eric Anpin ma'atek yomim. Eric Anpin receives the shefa from atek yomim ad Ein Sof, and it goes all the way up to the Ein Sof Baruch Hu ad Kan Lashona. That's the language of the Eitz Chaim. Nimsa shehi afshad azav v'nuk lehizdabek. So it comes out that it's impossible for Zer Anpin and his nuk to have a yichud. Alaim came yam shichu tipa samochim ma'abba ve'ima, unless the tipa of Shefa that ultimately came from the Ein Sof Baruch Hu, is going to be able to reach them. Abba v'ima yikchu hamochim ma'rich. Abba v'ima they receive the mochim from Eric Anpin. Verik yikach ma'atik, and Eric Anpin takes it from Atik. Ad Roma ma'alis, until you reach the Most High place. Then sheshiba kriya Shema. So what happens like this, when you say the kriya Shema, that's why you say the Kriya Shema. You say the Kriya Shema because it brings mochim chadashim into Zachar v'Nog. Tzrikim koda dizdabin called the partzufim erona ba'alad. But before that can happen, all of the partzufim up and down the line, that is from Atik Yamim and beyond Atik Yamim, where we really don't have a vocabulary, and then into Eric Anpin, and then Abba Ima, and then ultimately into the Zachar v'Nog ad Abba v'Ima, until it reaches Abba v'Ima. Then he says, Kadei shekol echad yamshich mochim the partzufim shalamata mehem. And the reason why all these yichudim are needed is in order to bring forth partzufim down below. Just like children, they give birth to their children too, but these are spiritual children. Ad shebesov mizdavgim Abba v'Ima, until the end, when Abba v'Ima actually make a yichud. And then what, as a result of that, they are extending down, or streaming down, mochin the Zachar v'Nog, so that the two of them, yuchlo the chizdabet b'tefilus immediate, they make a yichud in the immediate, the whole in the neshamot nach tachtonim, and then the yichud that takes place ultimately, that really brings the shefa into the lower worlds to us, takes place in the Shemona Esrei. So let me see. Just give me 1 second. Let me see if I didn't learn this already somehow. But let's see. So let's see like this. So it's known now. We understand when you have a yichud between Zachar and Nuk. In a pashutu, this is simple. That the time that they make a yichud is different. There are different times. And there's all different kinds of yichud. So let's see what he means. Im bechinas zivug yisrael v'rachel. So this is getting a little thicker now. If we're talking about the yichud that takes place between Yisrael and Rachel, v'im zivug Yisrael v'leah, or Yisrael v'leah, v'im zivug Yaakov v'rachel, v'im zivug Yaakov v'leah. Now understand the Yisrael, I think in this case, and we'll see what the Tiv says about it, there's more to be said, refers to the whole of Zer Anpin. So Rachel, when she's face to face with him, or it's Yisrael and Leah. So this is going to be above the chazit possibly. Bim zivug Yaakov and Rachel. So Yaakov is the smaller version of Zer Anpin, and he's from the chazit lamata. And Rachel, she's also in the back of Zer Anpin. She's from the chazit lamata. So that's what we're talking about. But there's also a yichud that takes place between Yaakov and Leah, above and possibly below the chazit. So let's see what the Teva Gavanos has to say about this. This is number Vav. Azivugim shazer anpin v'nuk hanimshachim bechem neshamot l'tachtonim, who bring neshamot to us. Einim shaveh b'kol zemanim. It's not the same all the time. Because man mishtanim zivugim, and as time goes on, as the world turns, the zivugim change. So here's a few zivugim that we want to talk about, the four of them. Zivug Yisrael v'Rachel. So what is this? Hu b'yom Shabbos. That takes place on Shabbos. Base the visit Zivug Yisrael v'Leah. Hu na'aseh b'chol. This has in the daytime, in the weekdays. But the tefillas mincha, the time of the tefillas mincha. Zivug Yaakov v'Rachel. Hu na'aseh b'chol, but the tefillas shachris has happened in the morning with the tefillah of shachris. And number down, the Zivug Yaakov v'Leah. Hu na'aseh b'chol. This is in the weekdays. But the tefillas arvis u'b'chatzos. It happens both those times, he says. Zat taloi b'kriya Shema be'ezeh makom amshichu abba ve'ima amochin lezaz. So this is the concept, that this really depends, when you're saying the Kriya Shema, from where is the place they are, that the original hamshicha from abba ve'ama starts from, l'mochin lezaz. Im rak b'makom shalachem, if it only comes from abba ve'ima themselves, or b'makom yoseh gavoa, or from a place that's higher. Now let's read on a little bit on the top. And let's see if we can, let me see, just take one more look over here down the road. Don't have any marks anywhere else, so let's go over here. So let's look at this up at the top. We'll read a little bit at the top, and we're on page Samach Gimel. The top said, "V'gam nizbar etzleinu seder ma'alas zivugim." So now we want to talk about the order of which are the most important zivugim. The drop, that is the drop, let's say like it's like the sperm, the drop of the sperm that's going to make the zivug for a zeranpin. Nemshechas min abba bilvad. Let's say it only comes from abba. Pirush mamashuhu chelko shal abba. That is that portion of zeranpin that comes into him from abba that brings the tipa. But sometimes it comes from a higher place. The tipa, we're talking about the tipa now, which apparently sounds like it's a masculine idea. But there are times when it comes from a higher place, shehum minarich. And sometimes it comes from atik. So let's come over here and let's look at number Zion down below. We're reading the tipa Gavonos. Let me push this up a little bit. And this is what he said. So it's always Abba Ve'ima, and we've seen this in different languages, that always enter into Zer Anpin, and they are the agents, because they're closest to the head of Zer Anpin, they are the agents that bring the Shefa into Zer Anpin. Rak yesh zaman shahamochim is lavshim rak ba'abba ve'ima, but there's sometimes that the mochin are only clothed, he says, what? Clothed inside of Abba. When is that? That's at the time of the Kriya Shema Shalamita. But there are times that the Mochin are also clothed inside of a Rich. The Arabis, that happens at the Kriya Shema that we say at nighttime, of a Kriya Shema the Garbanos in that time too. But even in a higher level, there's time that it's the motion, the are clothed. This is the language that he used. It's the clothing that brings them in. In other words, let's say like you have this tipa that's coming from the Roma Ma'alos, and it has to be, in order to be able to go into the lower places, it has to be clothed, because the light is a light of nothingness. It's a light that doesn't have physicality, and this is a creation of physicality. So therefore, it has to be mislavish or clothed in some place, sometimes from Atik, sometimes from the Kitzonius of Arik, as he's saying. The Yotzer, that happens at the Kriya Shema of Yotzer. Now, we'll go up to the top and we'll read this. According to the greatness, now we don't know what greatness means here, the zivah that takes place with the Zeranpin, that is the same method that we understand as we're talking about bringing down the mochim from the higher place. So let's look over here at number Hey, and let's see what the Tiva Kavanos wants to come and explain on this. So according to the level, the quality of the hamshacha, of the tipa that's coming from the most island, there's the tipa zaro, the seed, the Kriya Shema. Kocha godol ma'ala zivug b'sim shalom. So let's understand what he said like this. The real yichud that takes place between Zachar and Nuk at this point, it takes place in the part of the Amida, which is the sim shalom. So therefore, that's going to be a complete coupling and a complete mating that's going to take place. So he says, so let's turn this around, this particular statement, sarsuhu v'darshuhu. So let's say that we're going to turn it around and let's explain it a different way. The Seder Ma'ala Zivug Zah, that the order of the higher and lower qualities of the zivugim that take place with Zeranpin, tolu be'ezim mochim kibel, it depends on what mochin he receives. B'kevin shachatipos, B'kevin sha'tipa zera ba min ha'mochim, so since the tipa itself comes from the mochim, v'lechem im hazam mekabel ha'mochim b'hislav shuchitzonius atik. So let's say like this, that the clothing that wraps itself around that this seed comes from the chitzonius of atik, behind the Kriya Shema de Yotzer, and that happens at the Kriya Shema of Yotzer. Yecholin la'asos acher kach ba'amida, you can make after that, when you come to the Amida, zivug Yaakov Rachel. You can make this yichud between Yaakov and Rachel. Shehu zivug hayosem b'shuva sheyesh b'chol. And this is the highest level that you can achieve during the weekdays. In the weekdays, the concept is like this: is their anpin is really basically a vuk. So you're looking at his teferis and going downwards, which is the chest going downwards. And Rachel is on the back of that. So she comes around to the front, and that's the yichud that takes place panim b'panim between Rachel and Yaakov. But that takes place during the weekdays. So let's take it, say he's going to receive this yichud, it's going to take place in partsufim that are lower than Atar. So the highest level of yichud during the weekdays, you're not going to be able to get it. It's going to be a weaker yichud. This is a yichud that takes place between Yaakov and Leah. So it comes out like this, that Zer Anpen and his Nuk, they're not able to make a yichud. Rak im yekabla mochim, which he says in parentheses, shehem tipos azera, which it represents the seed itself, milamala. So they have to, in order, there's no possibility that for them, it's a v'zachar denuk to make a yichud unless they receive this tipa. And according to the quality of the mochin that they receive, b'kriya Shemah kachu sedem ala zevugim. Now let's just see this one little piece more. It says gam da. So you have to know this. Kine b'kol parts of in every single parts of yesh panemius v'chitzonius. Now we just said that in the shir on Rosh Hashanah, and we have to understand that's a panemius and mishonis. But pamim nimshachan tipa min chitzonius. Sometimes the tipa is extended down from the chitzonius, and the pamim min the panemius. So in other words, he has said previously, I don't know if you can say this now, he said this previously, that the panemius is always the most important. That represents the neshama part. And the chitzonius is more like the body. It's more like the body. Let's just read this part here, and then it's going to be the shir for today. This is what the Eitz Chaim says. The Nibayar Inyan, it explained like this: Hakitzonius v'panemius ma'inyonim. What's pshat over here in these two different things? So he says, Ki hitzonius ein metzius olamos. So what you see in the reality or the physicality of the world is what you see in hitzonius. But panemius ain't bechinas in the neshama, but the panemius is the neshamas. That part was inside. So we come like this, and we say like this: in zer anpen in his nook. But all the partsufim. It's the same thing in all partsufim. Beis bechinos. There are two aspects that are different. Rishon, that one of the Aleph, who bechinas chitzonius asher bechem. So the first part of looking at is looking at their chitzonius. Kadin menaguf, it's like a body, el haneshama shebifnim. Amnam yesh bechina beis, but there's another aspect, v'hu apanimia shebo, shuhu ayin neshama alaguf shebechutz. So it's like a neshama that's in the body, and the body's on the outside, and the neshama's on the inside, and we have to understand that. We saw this already today in another dovetailed with this in our shir on Rosh Hashanah. This is Baruch Flashman, and we'll pick it up tomorrow, God willing.